Welcome back, panelists here. Betsy Woodruff Swan, national correspondent for Politico. Politico playbook co-author Eugene Daniels, so Politico owes us a lot this week. Brendan Buck, the former advisor to House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner. And Symone Sanders-Townsend, host of Symone and the former chief spokesperson for Vice President Kamala Harris, also part of the Biden campaign. Betsy, you were in the courtroom when the Hunter Biden plea deal fell apart. You were covering that story live. Did you think 2 weeks later you were covering a special counsel?
In the courtroom that day, it was clear that things were going totally sideways. And it was clear that one of the most basic things Justice Department prosecutors and defense attorneys are always supposed to do before rolling out a plea deal that they had not done. What they had not agreed on, according to this court hearing, was just how much protection Hunter Biden would receive from other future criminal charges from DOJ. And at the same time, in that totally wacky, bizarro world hearing, Justice Department prosecutors also said they were still investigating Hunter Biden, and they refused to give any elaboration on what they meant by that. So it's not surprising at all that 2 weeks later, when DOJ and those defense lawyers went back to the drawing board, they couldn't change where they were at on just how much the plea deal would limit the Justice Department. That was the key issue. How much continued criminal exposure did Hunter face? They couldn't agree on it, and it's not a surprise that now DOJ says they're headed to trial.
Eugene, I can't help but bring up what Chuck Rosenberg said. He just thought this appointment was cosmetic.
Yeah.
Which makes you think that Garland is almost so worried about perception. Are we focused on the reality?
Yeah, one of the things about Garland from the very beginning, anyone that you talk to who was a part of the actual choosing of Merrick Garland, is that they were always worried that he was someone who was going to stay way too far back. He was going to be someone who was going to be doing special counsels because he was so concerned with the perception.
I thought the whole point of a circuit court judge was to avoid a special. That was the whole idea. Exactly. You're bringing in somebody that's been got bipartisan confirmation here.
Exactly. And he is, but there's something about the way that Merrick Garland sees the world. Yeah. One, the 4 years of Donald Trump and the DOJ and those fights, that he just wanted to make sure that there was not even people couldn't even sniff it out that there was something going on wrong. And that's what we're seeing, special counsel after special counsel after special counsel.
Symone, is this going to harm the campaign more personally because President Biden, you can't talk to him about this than it does practically, or do you think this is pretty harmful to the campaign?
I think that this is something that President Biden is being talked to about. The question is it a big group roundtable conversation? I would argue to say no. If you look at the Ipsos poll right after the plea deal that then fell apart, but the plea deal that was announced for Hunter Biden, Americans who were polled and who were asked, they viewed this as a personal issue for Hunter and not an issue for President Biden. And so right now, it is not actually affecting the way that people are, considering voting in 2024.
Though, Brendan, you can't help but watch all this play out. And it's like Donald Trump has been trying to bring Biden's brand down to him. Goes back to 2018 when he sent Rudy Giuliani to Ukraine. He's been desperate, and he did it. Yeah. And it's Joe Biden's own attorney general that just announced the investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic politics, trying to turn your opponent's strength into a weakness. And one of the things that I think Joe Biden was elected to do was to clear out the mess in the White House, bring ethics and decency back. And this is clearly an effort to do that. Now, I think the White House and the president's reelection need to take this a bit more seriously than what they're doing. It was very easy for a long time for Democrats to just say, well, that's stuff on the crazy right-wing websites.
They could call it House Republican stuff, right?
Yeah, and now if it's going to be in trial, it's going to be front page news everywhere. I think they need to appreciate that this could damage him pretty seriously.
I want to bring something up, though, about the whole legal. Let me show you this excerpt from an Axios focus group about the indictments. Michigan swing voters from our friend Rich Tao. Here it is.
Who could tell me what this latest indictment is related to? In other words, what event? Who could tell me what this is related to? Without blurting it out. 5 of you. Shantae, what is it about?
I'm torn on the Georgia or the documents. It's one of those two.
I thought it was about the whole Stormy Daniels scandal.
This is something that you wonder, is it all mud? And it's hard. How many voters are like them that they're just seeing the mud, they're not seeing the details?
There's a real question as to how much the details that continue to emerge in court related to Trump are going to move where voters are at on these things, because there's already been so much out in relation to the former president. When it comes to the Biden side of the issue, though, there's actually a huge potential political landmine for President Biden. That is, Hunter Biden's lawyers have told DOJ that if they bring charges against him of being a drug user in possession of a gun, which is a felony, Hunter's lawyers have said that they will argue that statute is unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. That would mean that if Biden is running for president as someone arguing to constrain gun rights, Hunter's lawyers would be defending him by saying, no, those rights need to be broader. Lots of other criminal defense lawyers have made that case, but talk about a massive political headache for the White House.
One of the things that the reason that it's probably worse for the Biden folks is because it's counter to what Biden has. The narrative is that I'm a family man who doesn't have a lot of drama. That's why you chose me. I'm here to put my hands on the way, exactly what Brendan's talking about. And most voters are not going to understand the differences about the things that are happening, right? You're special counsel, and that is the concern to folks. And the Biden folks, they have already resigned themselves that Hunter Biden was going to be used as a bludgeon against them during the campaign. They don't see this as that different.
The confusion there is exactly what I'm talking about. The Democrats need to realize that if you don't define this, Republicans are going to get in there and jump in and explain what happened. And they're going to tie it to the president. And they need to be very clear that no evidence has been found to tying it to him.
Symone, Dean Phillips. I wanted to get you on Dean Phillips.
What about Dean Phillips?
Well, I had a feeling that. Do you think by the end of this, do you think that between Hunter Biden and this hand-wringing about him in general and his poll numbers, you think somebody more serious is going to jump in?
Chuck, I wrote down what Congressman Phillips said. He said, it's a call to action to ask the president to pass the torch. My question is, where were these conversations when there were all of these articles from Politico to the Wall Street Journal and to Axios about the president not having announced a re-election campaign yet, wondering if he's going to get in and do it? That, I think, would have been the time where folks should, air these concerns and these grievances. I do not think there is a legitimate appetite for another Democratic candidate.
All right. You're going to get in, and again, so all of you will. We're going to come back.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.